Well, I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Justin Marchegiani. He just wrote a new great book, The Thyroid Reboot, How to Identify and Address Your Top 10 Symptoms in 30 Days. Dr. Justin is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to natural health, so I'm excited about this interview. Justin, how are you doing today?
Dr. Jockers, it is great to be here. Excited to chat with you. It's always a fun time when we get together. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We go way back. We've been talking for what,
We're
7, 8
OGs.
years?
We're
So that's
OGs,
right.
man.
That's right. When it comes to natural health, we've been putting out content for many years, 10, 15 years. So awesome about your book, The Thyroid Reboot. Excited to dive into that. And let's start with just talking about the importance of the thyroid. How do thyroid hormones impact our physiology?
Well, thyroid hormones control metabolism, right? Metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions in the body. Every cell has a receptor site for thyroid hormone. So it controls energy, controls body temperature. And essentially, anytime you have a down regulation in energy or metabolic activity in a certain area, fatigue, mood issues, bowel motility, difficulty adapting to stress, and then of course the more stressed you are, that can impact sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic, so then you're not recovering as much, you're more stressed, then you're making less stomach acid and enzymes and less bile, then you're not absorbing your food, then you're making it easier for bugs and microbes to overgrow, and then of course 80% of your immune system is in the gut, and so as the gut starts to go, so does the immune system, and we know most thyroid issues have an autoimmune component to it. That means your immune system is attacking the thyroid tissue, and conventional medicine really ignores that underlying mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we talk about thyroid issues, most of the time people deal with hypothyroidism or too low thyroid hormones circulating. But some people can also deal with hyperthyroidism. Can you go through like common symptoms that somebody's dealing with one of these thyroid issues?
Yes. So most thyroid issues in regards to like hyperthyroid are going to be things like Graves. Only about 1% or less of thyroid issues are on the autoimmune Graves side. And so typically what you're going to see is you have TSH, which is your pituitary hormone. It's a brain hormone. So when most doctors are actually testing, they're saying, oh, we're testing for your thyroid. They're really actually testing a brain hormone that talks to your thyroid. So then TSH, it's an inverse. So as TSH goes up, it's because your thyroid is not listening and making thyroid hormone. So it's kind of like as a parent, right? You have to raise your voice if your kids aren't listening. Your thyroid is raising its voice to get the thyroid to make T4, which is more inactive, and then T4 gets converted to T3, which is more active. And so as TSH drops, it's usually an indirect correlation, or I should say an indirect correlation that the thyroid's higher. So with Graves, for instance, we see very low TSH, below 0.5 or lower, and that usually is indicative of higher T4 and then higher T3, and you're going to have things like irritability, anxiety, sweating, insomnia, heart palpitations or abnormal heart rate, heart rhythm, and of course, if it goes too extreme, you can have a thyroid storm where the hormone's so high it could potentially create a stroke or heart issue. And so it's on the more rare side, but you're going to see a hallmark there are these things called TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, and TRAb, thyroid receptor site antibodies that bind to the outside of the thyroid, and they just whip it like a tired horse, like a horse, and it just makes it go really high. And so you can see that. And again, a lot of times Hashimoto's, though, can feel like Graves in early stages because you have these other antibodies called TPO or thyroglobulin antibodies that come in, they attack the thyroid, and you can have a little bit of this leakage of thyroid hormone that comes out that can feel acutely like Graves. And so sometimes people that have the Hashimoto's hypothyroid, and again, it always starts off a little bit hyper, but then over time it will go hypo, but it can still feel like it's hyper with true Graves, but also with true Hashimoto's too.
Yeah. And so Hashimoto's is autoimmune hypothyroidism, where the body is
Correct.
attacking the thyroid, damaging the thyroid tissue. And over time, again, that leads to inadequate production of thyroid hormone, right? And
Correct.
Hashimoto's is the number one root cause of clinical hypothyroidism.
Correct. And a lot of times Hashimoto's, it takes years to go hypo. It takes a very, very long period of time. So it's not going to happen that way out of the gate. And again, conventional medicine, if you're just relying on TSH, you could potentially have this underlying mechanism happening for over a decade before anything's done. That's the hard part.
Yeah, for sure.
These late stage indicators. Like if you have to wait till your house is like on fire and smoking, well, the fire detector should pick up the smoke as soon as it happens, right? So we want an early stage indicator. And conventional medicine, their treatment for autoimmune issues, like let's say it's joint issues or gut issues, are going to be biologics like Humira or Enbrel, or they're going to do like different immunosuppressants or maybe extreme steroids, and they just shut down the immune system. They shut down the inflammation. Or if they use prednisone, it's going to create potential bone issues or high blood sugar issues. It's not going to fix the problem, the underlying issue. And those medications inherently have a lot of side effects. So when it comes to conventional medicine, they typically don't prescribe those drugs for autoimmune thyroid issues. And so you're left with really nothing to treat the autoimmunity. They're just giving you some Synthroid, some synthetic T4 with a sodium molecule bound to it. It's either called Synthroid or Levoxyl or levothyroxine, and that's there to bring that TSH down. Because if T4 is low downstream, if we can increase the T4, then that TSH seesaws back down. It's a seesaw. So if T4 is low and TSH is high, and you bring up a T4, it should seesaw back down the TSH. That's kind of what they're treating.
Yeah, I want to circle back to that and help people understand TSH, T4, T3, and how thyroid hormone actually gets to the cell. But first, what are the most common symptoms somebody's dealing with hypothyroidism?
So you can have some of these hyperthyroid symptoms too. So you could have anxiety, you could have insomnia. Telltale ones are going to be, especially more for women, you're going to see the hair shedding, the hair thinning, the outer third of the eyebrow. You're going to potentially have cold hands, cold feet, especially if it's, a normal 70, mid to low 70 day, and someone shakes your hand. You can really feel that cold hand. Or you could see Raynaud's phenomenon where you have the vasospasms and your fingers get really, really white when it's colder out. Those are all telltale signs. You can even see bowel motility issues and constipation. Those are pretty common too. And so and these things kind of overlap with adrenal. People think, also fatigue. So yeah, I have fatigue. I have some mood issues. I may have some dysregulation in regards to how I deal with stress. I may have some sleep. Those can kind of overlap with adrenal problems. That's kind of the hard thing about it. So like the hallmark I really look at is going to be the cold hands, the cold feet, the hair thinning. Those tend to stand alone more with thyroid.
Yeah, for sure. And that outer third of the eyebrow.
Outer third of the eyebrow thinning. Yep, correct.
It's one of the big things people can look at, right? Constipation would be another big thing.
Yeah, bowel motility. Yep, correct. But again, you could have bowel motility problems because you have adrenal issues and you have SIBO. So that's why I always tell patients, if we're on the fence, and also, lower body temperature is a big one. So we can do a basal metabolic temperature test. And so with low thyroid, you tend to see lower basal temperature, let's say in the lower 97s, chronically low. Where adrenal issues, the temperature tends to be lower, but it also bounces around. So if we have steady low, that tends to be more thyroid. If we have low but bouncing around low, that could be more adrenal and thyroid. If we have normal but bouncing around, that could be more adrenal. And again, these aren't like set 100% things. These are just, it's a clinical tool that we'll look at and say, hey, why don't you test this and let's see. But in the end, we're going to order the right testing to confirm either way.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned in the conventional model, they're looking at TSH and T4 primarily, and they're giving synthetic T4 to lower TSH in the case of hypothyroidism because TSH will be real high. Why? So when we look at in functional medicine, we're looking at T3 in particular, which really conventional medicine really does not look as much at. Can you explain the role and kind of the physiology of T4, T3 and how thyroid hormone actually penetrates a cell, right, and actually causes the mitochondria to activate cellular energy?
Yeah, so if you look at kind of thyroid hormone metabolism, right, in my book, The Thyroid Reboot, I go into it. I have some really good flow charts, and we look at all of the upstream mechanisms as well as the downstream. Because there's a lot of things. I call it's the domino rally of thyroid hormone activation. So the first thing is we need healthy brain signaling from the hypothalamus down to the pituitary. So that involves thyroid releasing hormone, TRH. And so things like lower dopamine, excess cortisol, chronic stress, chronic inflammation, that can impact the first domino. And so we want to see healthy dopamine levels. And guess what? Chronic stress or inflammation can take that dopamine and it can bring it downstream into adrenaline, right? Which is a fight or flight hormone. And so for chronically stressed, that dopamine can be impaired. So we like to look at organic acids and look at vanilmandelate, homovanillate, dopac, metabolism. That tells us a little bit about our brain chemistry. And also there's certain important B vitamins. If we have an MTHFR issue, B6, B12, folate, these are important B vitamins that help with that neurotransmitter activation. So if we have like an anemia, or if we have really, let's say, gut dysfunction, like let's say we have intrinsic factor problems in our stomach, we're not binding up B12 with intrinsic factor in our stomach, that can impact metabolism from a pituitary level or from a hypothalamus level. And then that TRH goes to our pituitary and makes TSH. And so excess cortisol can create problems. Let's say we have low fat soluble vitamin A. Let's say we're a vegan vegetarian. We're like, oh, we think that we're doing a great job because we're eating carrots and we're getting beta carotene, but that has to get activated into vitamin A. And so things like cod liver oil, grass-fed liver, egg yolks, grass-fed meat, like really healthy fat-soluble vitamins are very important for the thyroid receptor sites at the pituitary level. So TSH is important. If we have high levels of insulin or cortisol or just inflammation, that's going to impact that TSH, those TSH levels, right? And so then TSH then talks to our thyroid to make T4. And T4 is relatively inactive. So what's T4? It's tetraiodothyronine. So the T, tetra, that means four molecules of iodine, and it's mixed in with a thyroglobulin kind of tyrosine protein at the base. And so that T4 essentially is produced at that thyroid, and it gets activated via an enzyme called deiodinase. And deiodinase is what it is. It deiodinates. It takes away an iodine. So it comes in. It's selenium-based enzyme. It's made by the liver. The enzyme comes in and it pulls off a iodine molecule, turning T4 into T3. Now, with that one little pull off of that iodine, it increases the metabolic activity of that hormone 300 to 400%, 3 to 4x. And so now the thyroid is more activated. So 20% of that conversion can happen at the thyroid gland itself. 60% can happen at the liver. So if we have low glutathione, or our liver's all bogged up because we have non-alcoholic fatty liver because we're insulin resistant, or we have, let's say, low levels of glutathione precursors like cysteine, glutamine, glycine, or we have toxic mold or metals, those can impact our thyroid. And plus, glutathione does modulate our immune system. And so that can impact the autoimmune stuff I talked about earlier. And so the other thing can be impacted by just chronic stress and inflammation. We can have this conversion to reverse T3 that can happen, which could potentially impact the receptor sites. And so kind of going from there, we have to look at that conversion, that T4 to T3. And so we need certain nutrients to make that happen. We need selenium, we need zinc, we need magnesium, we need copper. We need healthy levels of cortisol, not too high, not too low. We need healthy levels of insulin, not too high, not too low. If we have an anemia, let's say low iron, or we have low B vitamin anemia, like a megaloblastic anemia, that can be a big issue because iron's an important cofactor in making that thyroid enzyme, that deiodinase enzyme. And so these are important mechanisms. And then if we add in, let's say, excess antibodies, and also iodine's an important building block too. But iodine's interesting because if we throw too much in it, it can rev up this iodination process, and it can increase potential antibodies and increase inflammation because that iodination process can spit out hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, and that's naturally can be inflammatory and increase that B cell. But things like selenium can come in there and it can bind up that oxygen on the peroxide. So it takes H2O2, pulls off an oxygen and makes it H2O, which is water, which is neutral, right? And so healthy nutrients and healthy levels of iodine and selenium, and not too much on the iodine, can be really important for that autoimmune aspect.
Yeah, and so many people are deficient in a lot of these nutrients, selenium, zinc, magnesium, correct. So critical for good thyroid function. So we're getting a lot of that conversion from T4 to T3 in the liver. Now there's also some in the gut as well. The gut microbiome plays a big role with this.
Yeah, T3 acetic acid and T3 sulfate. And healthy gut bacteria makes an enzyme called sulfatase. It's either sulfase or sulfatase. And that enzyme helps convert that T4, that T3 sulfate and T3 acetic acid into healthy active T3. And so good healthy gut bacteria is important. Plus, if we have bad bacteria, that can also take the enzymes that metabolize, or I should say, there's an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase in our gut. It's made by bad bacteria. That enzyme takes estrogen that's being detoxified and it releases it back into the system. And so high levels of estrogen, because it's not being detoxified, can decrease that free thyroid hormone. So it can lower the free T4, it can lower the free T3. That's why women on birth control pills, that can impact your thyroid too. That's why a big side effect of birth control pills are going to be, more fatigue, more mood issues because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always tell people, if you have a thyroid issue, most likely you've got a liver and gut issue going on.
Yes.
You've got to address the liver and the gut in order to make sure the thyroid is functioning well. And also the brain, right? There can be in a kind of an HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis issue, or obviously hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis issue, where the brain's communication with the endocrine system is being disrupted as well.
And that goes back to the TRH and the TSH, with dopamine and stress and chronic inflammation, and obviously sleep and those things make a big deal. And I think a big difference. But also too, I see a lot of functional medicine doctors where, people search a symptom, they search a keyword. And so it's okay to put a video or content up where we talk about the thyroid and we act like the thyroid is going to be the thing that you're going to looking at, but we don't act like the thyroid is the end all or be all and it self-destructs within its own system. Other things, like we mentioned, the gut, the immune, detox play a role. But a lot of functional medicine doctors, they market functional medicine, but they're using functional medicine in a very allopathic way by only treating the thyroid. And so it's very important, whoever you're working with, make sure, okay, you came in for thyroid issues, but make sure we're connecting the gut, the liver, the nutrients, the stress, the sleep. Make sure other things are being connected to it. You're not just focusing on, oh, selenium good. Oh, thyroid glandular good.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, what are some of the main, you talked about it a little bit as we've gone through the physiology, but what are some of the main root cause factors for hypothyroidism?
So big thing you're going to see is just insulin resistance. If you go online and type in insulin resistance, or just type in diabetes and low triiodothyronine or low or hypothyroid, you'll find all kinds of studies showing the more insulin resistant or diabetic someone is, because diabetes is just extreme insulin resistance. That's all it is. It's on a spectrum. The more insulin resistant you are, the more your thyroid hormone drops. So that's a big thing. Because we know consumptions of sugar have gone from 4 pounds a year in 1900 to 140 pounds a year today. And that's average. And so for every person like me and you that maybe consume 5 or 10, there's someone else consuming 300, right? So it's kind of crazy to think about it like that. So I'd say that would be a big one. And then, of course, just general stress and inflammation is going to create cortisol imbalances. And that can create big issues going on there. Also, people that think they're doing their body, a good thing by being vegan and vegetarian, right? And they're saving the environment or animals. Well, you're missing so many important fat-soluble vitamins, B vitamins, iron. That's going to have a big impact on your thyroid too. So those are 2 or 3 out of the gate. And of course, once you have gut issues, that throws off the immune system, because 80% of the immune cells live there, and that can impact absorption. Because just because you're eating those foods, if the acid and enzymes and bile isn't there, you may not be fully absorbing it too.
Yeah, no doubt. And then toxicity has got to play a big role. All the microplastics, phthalates, all the heavy metals, all the things that we're being exposed to, pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate, damaging the gut, all of that's impacting it.
Glyphosate damages the gut. All these microplastics are going to increase, they're going to decrease our free fraction of thyroid hormone, because estrogens bind up free hormone. And so that's why it's good to have a good reverse osmosis water filter. Add your minerals back in, or if you're going to drink water, drink it out of glass, like a Mountain Valley or a Topo Chico or a Gerolstein, or a good reputable brand that has glass is good too.
Yeah, no doubt. When you're looking at labs, where do you want the TSH to be, the T4, T3, free T3? When you're looking at a thyroid panel, where should these levels be?
It's a great question. So there's a lot of doctors in the functional medicine world that disagree on this stuff. The first thing is, I don't like elevated TSH. Elevated TSH can overstimulate the thyroid gland and cause cell proliferation, cells to grow. Think of a goiter, right? So we don't want high levels of TSH. But we have to look. Let's say TSH is a little bit elevated, but your T4 and T3 look good. Let's say you're right in the middle of the functional range with T4. Let's say you're 1.2, 1.3, your T3s are in the mid-3s. And you feel decent. You don't have a lot of thyroid symptoms. What do? Well, maybe we want to look at cortisol, insulin. Maybe we want to work at nutrients to help the pituitary receptor sites to bring that down. So you have to be very careful with that. When all the downstream looks good and antibodies look good, then you got to look more at the adrenal and the stress and some of the nutrients. But you don't want that TSH to stay high too long, because that can cause cell proliferation to occur.
Yeah, basically like a TSH resistance is kind of like the first step, kind of like insulin resistance. You could have good blood sugar and your hemoglobin A1C could look good, but if your insulin's elevated, we know that's contributing to poor fat burning, poor mitochondrial function. It's contributing to inflammation in your body, right? Thyroid issues. And so same with the TSH, we want to make sure that your body's real sensitive to the TSH and producing the right amount of thyroid hormone with the right amount of TSH.
Correct. And hypothetically, maybe the pituitary has to stay at that level to keep thyroid normal, right? To keep it normal.
Right.
So that's where we'd want to look at the adrenals, look at stress, make sure all the diet and lifestyle and toxicity things are good, make sure all the nutrients that, we're going to be focusing on vitamin A. We're going to be looking at the adrenals. We'll be dialing that in. Now, let's say TSH is elevated and T4 and T3 are low. Well, then we may want to start looking at thyroid hormone support. Of course, I'm always like this. It's the order of operations. It's diet and lifestyle have to be there. If I always assume there's some level of autoimmunity, even if we can't test it, because there's such thing as seronegative autoimmunity, where 10% will test positive for Hashimoto's or some level of thyroiditis on an ultrasound. They'll see some inflammation at an ultrasound level, but they won't actually make the immunological blood markers showing TPO or thyroglobulin antibodies. So I always assume there's something going on there, and we put people on an autoimmune diet. And we're going to make sure the nutrient density gets up. We're going to look at the adrenals. We're going to do all of the foundational things first. Everything you could think of, from water, hydration, electrolytes, sleep, movement, prayer, meditation, whatever, right? All those things are done. And then we can kind of come back and see where we're sitting, and then we may want to add in some non-desiccated thyroid glandular, or maybe even a potential prescription if need be, whether it's Armour or NP thyroid. And I always recommend starting low, and I always recommend doing it twice a day. Patients feel better with T3 that's more stable throughout the day. A non-desiccated thyroid glandular will have some T3 in it. It'll also have protomorphogenic proteins, which can be very helpful for thyroid. They'll also have things like calcitonin, which can help with calcium mineral balance. And so it's just going to depend upon where that is there. And then also, is T4 good? Well, let's say TSH is a little high. Let's say T4 is good, but T3 is low. And so then we really have to make sure that conversion's there. And if we do give a desiccated thyroid glandular, does that T4 stay good? Or does it go high and then T3 come normal? So it's a little bit of an art and a science there, and that's why you can't just treat the thyroid in isolation. That's why we're doing all of the functional medicine principles first. That sets the foundation, and then we come here. So if you're listening in and you're like, well, I just want to zoom in on this one part, you're going to miss the boat if you don't do all of the other things first. And this is where someone needs to see a practitioner, because it can get a little confusing and a little overwhelming if you don't have that foundation dialed in first.
Yeah, for sure. Now, where can somebody start without a practitioner? What you talked about the foundation. Where can somebody start with that?
Yeah, so first thing is get the diet dialed in. Even if it's just whole foods, keeping away any processed sugar, being 100% grain-free, have healthy proteins and healthy fats at every single meal. Make sure your meat's organic. If you want to throw in some organ support, that's great. Try to choose more healthy saturated fats. Or if you're going to do any plant fats, keep it cold press, single source, olive oil, cold press, avocado oil, cold press, single source. Start there. Try to eat good protein, good fats at every meal. See how you feel. Some people, if there's severe insulin resistance, you could potentially look at doing a little bit of intermittent fasting. If you're a female, you got to be careful, because sometimes that can flare up PMS or flare up stuff. The key is, if you're going to add in any fasting, you got to still make sure there's enough nutrients coming in, because if you need, let's say hypothetically, 2,000 calories of nutrient-dense food, and now you're at 1,000 or 1,500, there's still a 500 calorie gap there. And again, calories really mean energy, but in my world, every single calorie is whole food, nutrient dense, good fats, good proteins. And so we want to make sure nutrient density is there. I prefer nutrient density over calories, because it qualifies what those calories are. So making sure the nutrient density is dialed in. And also, I like using a blood sugar meter. I tell patients, go see how insulin resistant you are. Get your blood sugar meter out, test your meal, test your blood sugar when you're fasting. Are you below 100? The first hour tells you the most, because you can 10, 12 hours later go to your doctor, get a CBC, and guess what? Our metabolic panel, and your glucose may be under 100, and you're not like 110 or 120. But in the first hour, we want to be, first off, fasting, we want to be below 100. Hour one, we want to be below 120, ideally, definitely 140, but ideally below 120 in hour one. Hour two, ideally below 100. Hour three, definitely below 100. So if we can be back below 100 in 2 hours, that's a good sign that we are not insulin resistant. And if we're seeing blood sugar above that time frame, then the things we can do is look at cutting down carbs, focusing on more vegetables, maybe even cutting down fruit, depending on how high that blood sugar is. So I love this approach because now we're individualizing it. We're not like, oh, you're just the low carb guy, you're the paleo guy. No, we're individualizing it for you, and the blood sugar does not lie. So I like that. And then we can adjust the carbs, we can adjust the fat, we can adjust the protein, we can add in a 5 or 10 minute walk after a meal. That can lower blood sugar 10 points, 15 points. Or before you eat, get those GLUT4 receptor sites primed by doing 15 air squats. Right? These are simple things. And then if we're still having problems, we may add in alpha lipoic acid, chromium, vanadium, ACV, magnesium. We may add in blood sugar nutrients to help metabolize that better. And so we really customize that out of the gate in regards to the diet. And then cutting out all the grains and all the dairy, even potentially butter, at least initially. But of course, we want to be able to add those things back over time. And again, if someone is really autoimmune, we're going to have to be more extreme. So just kind of, if we see lots of antibodies, we got to be more extreme with the diet.
Yep. So really focus on that good blood sugar stabilizing diet, nutrient dense diet, starting with that, getting exercise, getting movement in, getting out in the sun can be really, really important. Sun helps charge the mitochondria, vitamin D production, nitric oxide, endorphins, so many great benefits to getting sun exposure. And then really also really good sleep, right? Trying to prioritize sleep.
Sleep's important. They've done studies, not even on college kids, where they did sleep deprivation, and after 1 week, the kids were pre-diabetic. So sleep helps a lot with blood sugar stability. So think of, just as diet's a big deal with blood sugar, right? So is sleep. So really be on top of that. And you can test your blood sugar after crappy sleep. Part of it is because you're less healing, you're less recovered because you made less growth hormone. This growth hormone peaks between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And you're going to have more cortisol, and more cortisol mobilizes sugar. People don't understand, but if you're stressed and you make a bunch of cortisol because of that stress response, you're literally mobilizing via gluconeogenesis a Snickers bar worth of sugar. 25 to 30 grams of sugar or glucose gets stimulated with an acute stress response. And so if you're stressed or you feel stressed, you better go for a 5, 10, 15-minute walk when you feel it. Clear up that glucose, or bust out, like I have an air bike and a rower behind me, I'll bust out a 5-10 minute Tabata to clear out the glucose from that stress.
Yeah. So good. This is such great information. And guys, you can check out Dr. Justin's book, The Thyroid Reboot. So you can check that on Amazon.com. I'll have a link in the show notes. And of course, you guys can just go on Amazon and look up The Thyroid Reboot. What can people expect from that book?
Yeah, so website is thyroidreboot.com. We'll redirect to the Amazon page. I put everything together. I made the book because I have an autoimmune thyroid issue. I put everything in the book that I use with patients. It's the guide that I wish I had when I started out in functional medicine 15 years ago. And so the difference is we connect the dots with the gut, with the diet. We talk about how to use blood sugar. We talk about nutrient density. We talk about toxicity. We talk about water, mold, heavy metals. We talk about how cortisol plays a role. Also, guess what? Women, if we have estrogen dominance or low progesterone, that also plays a role, right? So, and men as well, whether we have cortisol issues or we have extra xenoestrogens or low testosterone, I try to connect the dots with all major body systems: infections, Lyme, heavy metals, diet, lifestyle, SIBO, gut bacteria, stress, and I try to go over the physiology. I try to break it down to you as if you were like a doctor or a medical student. Like, okay, let's just make it understandable what's happening in your body. Because if you can zoom in and understand it, then you understand the application. You understand why we're doing it. It's not just doctor's orders, do this. Here's why we're doing it. And then we kind of really lay things out in a conceptual way. Because if you understand a concept, you got it. If you try to memorize stuff, you're going to get it on the test and then you're going to forget it. So I try to conceptually and use metaphors and things like that to get the concepts in.
Yeah, you're a great communicator, and looking forward to checking out this book, guys. You got to check it out with me, The Thyroid Reboot. Check that out now. Also, share it with people that you know and that you care about as well. Dr. Justin, thanks so much for this interview. Any last words of inspiration here for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thyroidreboot.com. That's the Amazon redirect there. I see patients worldwide as well. My staff and I do. So we practice all these concepts with patients directly. This is not just a thought experiment for me. This is like, it's a verb, it's an action. We're doing it, we're applying it. So if you feel like you need more support and the book's not enough, you can go to justinhealth.com, work with Dr. J. There's a button there, click it, and we can see if you're a good fit for care. We also have a podcast and a YouTube channel where we provide lots of great info. So if you want more info like this, justinhealth.com, and there'll be more info there for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Justin. Guys, go check it out, thyroidreboot.com. Be blessed, everybody.
Thanks, Doc.